Andrew Yang, buenas noches.
Very good.
Muchísimas gracias por atendernos a Hora 25.
It's really been a pleasure.
Señor Yang, enhorabuena por este Premio Mundial de la Paz y la Libertad. ¿Qué supone para usted el premio?
Well, it means that the things that I have been doing all my life will maybe right for me to do. When Javier asked me when I got started, I said, I was born in New Orleans in a neighborhood with an Irish grocery store on one corner, an Italian bar on another corner, and the Nazi Party was on the third corner. And this was in 1932. And so I had to be a diplomat of sorts just to go to the grocery store or to get to my school. And you learn very young that it's easier to speak to people and make friends than to be afraid. You also know that you can't show fear. And if people think you're afraid, they'll pick on you. So I had to learn to fight so I wouldn't have to fight. And it's sort of what has kept me for these 91 years, that my father drilled it into me over and over. Don't get mad, get smart. If you lose your temper in a fight, you lose the fight.
La suya es una vida dedicada a la diplomacia y a la lucha por los derechos civiles. A día de hoy, ¿cuál es la prioridad en esa lucha? ¿Cuál es el principal reto en la lucha por los derechos civiles?
My main purpose since I turned 91 years old is just to hope I can get into heaven.
Y el de sus herederos en esa lucha de los derechos civiles hoy, ¿cuál debería ser el principal propósito?
Well, I think that our conference here was about the rule of law. And the rule of law means that we should live together as brothers and everybody be treated fairly.
¿Tiene la sensación de que ese respeto al Estado de Derecho y al imperio de la ley está en peligro hoy en Estados Unidos?
Well, the rule of law is in danger everywhere because everybody in power, anywhere, any kind of power, wants to stay in power. And they want the rule of law to be interpreted according to them. And the rule of law is to be fair and even-handed for all sides.
¿Cuál debería ser hoy el papel de Estados Unidos en el mundo en 2023? ¿Cuál es y cuál debería ser?
The United States proclaims it is a democracy. That means it should be fair to all its citizens, but it should be fair to all of the citizens of the world. And because we are a strong economy, we end up getting pulled in more often to more things. I was with the United States government at the time of Vietnam, but I didn't think we should be involved in trying to tell Vietnam what to do. And before I left the UN, I got China and Vietnam to sit down together and work out some disputes they had on the border. Now, we were there to try to keep China from taking over, but China felt that Vietnam was trying to take them over, and we made a lot of mistakes there. But everybody makes mistakes. In Spain, it was a big mistake to get so deeply involved in slavery. And yet Spain seems to have recovered from that.
¿Cómo ve la España de hoy, embajador?
Well, Spain feels good, and it looks good. And I was very impressed with your king, and I have been very impressed with your people. And I have been here several times before, but I always enjoy myself in Spain. My frustration is that I don't speak Spanish, but my son's wife is from Venezuela, and all of my grandchildren speak Spanish. So we get by.
Embajador, usted fue el primer embajador afroamericano de Estados Unidos ante Naciones Unidas. ¿Cómo ve las Naciones Unidas de hoy? ¿Hasta qué punto se ha convertido en una organización, un organismo poco anquilosado para el mundo que nos rodea?
Well, both are true. It's very, very useful in maintaining a global world order. But when it comes to dealing with hunger and famine all over the world, it doesn't have the resources. But this is where we will solve these problems, is talking, agreeing to a solution, and funding it. And we have many problems. The problem of global warming cannot be solved by any one country. But together at the United Nations, we might make some impact.
Señor Young, la suya es una historia fascinante, por lo que comentábamos antes, por su dedicación a la lucha por los derechos civiles, por lo que usted hizo y también porque en gran parte es una historia compartida con un icono internacional histórico como Martin Luther King. Con la distancia, ¿usted cómo definiría aquellos años de lucha, los que compartió con Luther King?
I think Dr. King would be even more relevant today than he was in 1955. In 1955, the only people who were talking about nonviolent change were the Indians and Gandhi. And we moved nonviolent negotiations into the UN. And the United States State Department has realized that its job is to solve problems without going to war. And I think there's a tremendous amount of work that the United Nations must do just to allow us to live together on this planet. It seems like it takes 11 hours to get to Spain, but from Atlanta. But if the price of gasoline goes up in Spain, it goes up in Atlanta. And we are a single network of humanity. And what happens on this planet affects us all.
Señor Young, he estado viendo estos últimos días imágenes de aquellas grandes marchas que protagonizaron ustedes y se ve una hostilidad que traspasa la historia. Y hay pancartas en las que se leen mensajes como el zoo os quiere, en referencia a los afroamericanos, les comparaban con animales, o pancartas en las que se lee dónde están los derechos civiles de los blancos. Yo le pregunto, ¿cree que esa xenofobia, ese supremacismo blanco ha desaparecido, ha mutado, está más acomplejado y por lo tanto se esconde o está renaciendo?
I think that white supremacy is still alive, but it's sick. It is not doing too well. And it's the desperation of people who are being who feel like they are being left behind. If you add up the Hispanic heritage in America, the Asian heritage, the Afro-Caribbean heritage, then white people are in a minority. And they are very uncomfortable. They've probably been in a minority a long time, but they were in a secure minority. They feel threatened now. But there's no need for that because, well, in Atlanta, we have had 9 black mayors in a row. And the things that we have done to grow the city are the same things that the white mayors were trying to do before us. We have been able to do it more successfully, but only because the difficult part got started with others. And we have taken the same ideas and modified them to meet the needs of everybody. And we're doing pretty well as a city. But even there, when I was mayor in 1981, the city was just 1 million people. Now it's over 7 million people. So everything gets more complicated. But we're still dealing with the problems, and we're still making life better for everybody, one day at a time.
¿Y le preocupa que Trump y lo que representa Trump insuflen oxígeno a ese supremacismo blanco?
Well, I think that white supremacy has existed in the United States all the way back to its founders. Most of the founding fathers, all but one, were slaveholders. So this is not just Trump. Every now and then somebody comes along to awaken it. In the 50s, it was George Wallace. In the 20s and 30s, they said it was Huey Long in Louisiana. There's always somebody coming up as a voice for people who feel like they are not being heard. And it's usually an extreme voice. But it doesn't sway the future. The future is maintained by the rule of law.
Me gustaría, señor Ian, volver por un momento al pasado, a uno de los episodios que supongo es de los más dolorosos de su vida, que es el asesinato de Martin Luther King. Usted estaba allí con él y de hecho, creo, y corríjame, que compartió ese momento con él, que le cogió en brazos, asumiendo que es un momento muy doloroso. Y dentro de lo que me quiera contar, ¿cómo vivió usted ese momento en el sentido de pensó que ahí acababa algo o ahí empezaba algo?
No, it's a strange viewpoint for some, but I am basically a Christian. I believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, and so did Martin Luther King. And he always talked about his death as though it could be any day. And he was only 25 when he started. He was 39 when he was killed. And he said that I would like to live a long time, but however long I live, my people will get to the promised land. When he talked about the promised land, he meant a creatively integrated society. And I don't know, but I look around Spain, and Spain is certainly more than one culture and more than one history. but you have blended it together into a beautiful, in fact, that's the phrase that Martin Luther King used to use. He said, we must become a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. And we might be playing different instruments, but we should all be playing the same tune or play together, and the music is more beautiful. That was his image, and he was also a very devout Christian. And he laughed to death. And he was always telling us, I know they are after me, but you all are always trying to jump in front of me to get your picture on television. And I think maybe one of you might take a bullet for me. He said, then I would have a hard time, because I'd have to find a way to preach you into heaven. And he would say all of the embarrassing things that he knew about you, and he'd make you laugh at your own death. He was more like a comedian preaching your funeral. And he did that to keep us from being afraid of death. And he'd say, every man, woman, and child must die sometimes. And you have nothing to say about when you die or how you die. Your only choice is what are you willing to give your life for. And he was always reminding us that we were a part of a larger moral and spiritual universe. And he was a devout believer in the power and the glory and the forgiveness that comes to all mankind through Jesus Christ.
En los libros de historia hemos estudiado al líder social, pero me gustaría que me contara usted cómo era Martin Luther King en la intimidad.
He had almost no private life. He was always traveling from one city to one country to other. He had a wife and 4 children, and his wife was committed to nonviolence also. In fact, when she was 15 years old, the Ku Klux Klan burned her house down just because it was a nice home owned by a black family. But her father had them kneel and pray and ask for forgiveness of the people who burned the house down, and they thanked God that none of them were in the house. And they really had no private life. Their children are now in their 50s, and they still are kind of angry that people expect them to be like their father, and they want to be themselves. And my son will do anything he wants to do to help the world, but he doesn't want to do what they think I should be doing. He wants to find his own mission. And that's, Martin Luther King really had no private life. And because from one to the other, and he was only 39, and he studied and finished his PhD degree by the time he was 25. And as soon as he sent his dissertation to Boston University, Rosa Parks sat down in the bus, and he ended up giving leadership to that movement.
¿Ha pensado alguna vez lo que Martin Luther King podría haber llegado a hacer, a dónde podría haber llegado si no lo hubiesen asesinado?
I think about it all the time. But he left many of us to continue his work. And there is a story in the Bible about Elisha going to heaven in a flaming chariot because God was rewarding his faithfulness. And that's the way I view his assassination, that he went to heaven in a flaming chariot, that the bullet entered his chin and it severed his spinal cord. But since bullets travel faster than sound, he probably never heard it, and he probably never felt it. And his body was gone, but the fact that we are here 60 years later still talking about him means that his spirit lives with us even to this day.
¿Está orgulloso de su vida, de su lucha?
Well, I am, because everything I have been involved in has turned out successfully. And I started when I was about 20 years old. And now I'm 91, so that's a long time. And everything I tried did not succeed, but most of the things we tried did succeed. We have pretty much desegregated America, but we've desegregated the White House. The young lady who is ambassador here from Spain is an American citizen, but she was born in the Dominican Republic. But she is representing the United States extremely well. Everything that's going on now, I don't like the war with Russia that's going on, but we always feel as though we have to support the one who is the most vulnerable. And the Russians started attacking Ukraine. And we help the weaker side, and we should. And everything that goes on now in the world is moving to be more just and more fair to all of the citizens of Earth.
Terminamos, señor Young. ¿Cómo ve a Biden? ¿Necesita 4 años más? ¿Se merece 4 años más?
I went to Congress in 1973 when Joe Biden went to the Senate. And so I've known him since 1973. And he's one of the most spiritual, intelligent, and powerful human beings I've met. His wife and children were killed shortly after he went to Congress, to the Senate. And he would go home, a truck turned over on top of them and crushed them. And his wife and daughter were in the car, and he had 2 more boys. And Delaware is just 100 miles or so from Washington. He went home every day on the train to fix dinner for his boys and to care for his family. And he was always in the right side of history and leading the country in the right direction. And he's done that with every president, Democrat or Republican. And I think he's one of the best presidents we've had in my lifetime. And I'm 91, and I don't feel tired. I think he's stronger than me. But I think I have to get on a plane and stand in line and check my baggage and, and make it on my own, and I survive and enjoy life. I don't know why we have to put a number and say, after this, you're old. In my church, we had a club of women that were all over 100. And they were 101 to 107. And when they would have a party or something, I would always go. And they always wanted to dance. And most of them could dance better than I can dance. And I think that there are places in the mountains of Tibet where people live to 115 and 120, where women have babies in their 90s. And because of the climate and because their bodies get very, very strong living in that cold. So there was a baseball player, a black baseball player by the name of Satchel Paige. And he used to say that age is just mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter.
Andrew Young, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much.